Yeah, I think so too.
I'm not a winter person.
Being in California, I am because I prefer the winter weather here compared to this.
Yeah.
This is too hot. Yeah, I actually don't like the summer because we live here,
Yeah.
and then my other home is Arizona.
Yeah.
It's like we hate the summers there.
Oh,
Plus, the tourists come here in the summer.
yeah.
It's like traffic gets way
Really
worse.
ridiculous.
I like Halloween
Mm.
until like June,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's a long part of the year. That's like
it's
almost
not-
the whole year.
Yeah, it's not bad.
No.
It's not bad.
All right, so let's see. Well, you got the interviews coming up. One is for a clinical research assistant, right?
Yeah,
And the other for CRA.
Yeah, it's a CRA 1, and then the other was the coordinator assistant. And so those are the two that I'm looking at. Well, waiting to interview with.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we can kind of go through that and answer both type of questions they would ask.
Mm-hmm.
The research assistant, is that for a site or who is that for?
The coordinator assistant is with Emory University, and it's assisting them with different clinics with each. They have I think it said 6 locations that they want you. So they have the actual coordinator, the project coordinator, and then you're going to be assisting them with the 6 sites. So
and they're seeing patients and all that.
They're seeing patients and everything, and having studies. So it's each one of those sites are having actual clinical trials, actual studies. Mm-hmm. And then you're assisting them in making sure that each one is following, the proper protocol and doing everything that they need to do for each study. So it's a different one at each site, and that you're helping them. So I thought that was interesting.
So that's the assistant.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good one.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That was really a good one. And
that's entry level?
And it's entry level, but like they said, you're an assistant to the actual main person, but I'm pretty sure you're probably...
But they like that you have some experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, and then the CRA...
The CRA 1 is...
Entry level also?
Yeah, that is entry level.
Wow.
Yeah, awesome.
That's really good in Atlanta. That's a tough
field
market.
To get into. Yeah, I noticed.
Wow. So you got to do really good in those interviews.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you still not clear on?
Well,
so we can focus on those things.
Okay.
And then I'll just ask you random questions.
Okay.
Like if it's a job like a mock interview, to see if the stuff you think you know, if you actually do know.
Okay, I was looking at, it's saying, is the subject screening and enrollment log up to date and accurate? And then when I was looking in the, looking at the subject information, and then I was also looking in the regulatory binder, it had a section with the monitoring logs, and then it had the RMB, the SIV,
mm-hmm.
and it had dates, but it had there were 2 of the same thing, so I didn't know, and it wasn't like a change or anything. It was the exact same thing, so I didn't know what would I...
That's okay. So, do you know what a screening and enrollment log is? What's the purpose of that log?
And that's what I was...
that's what you're looking for?
Yeah, okay. That's what I was looking for, because I'm like, okay, I had the monitoring log, and I saw that, but I didn't know, and maybe I was overlooking the enrollment.
Don't confuse those two, though.
Yeah, because I know they have to be completely different.
So that's good. So what do you do when from the site they'll ask you this interview question one way, mm-hmm. and then as a CRA they'll ask you this question another way, because the site, they want to maintain their screening and enrollment logs, and the CRAs want to make sure that their coordinators are maintaining it. But it's for different reasons. Like the site just needs to do it to keep the CRAs happy, really. And the CRAs need everything done so that they can get their reports.
So they can monitor everything quickly.
But for your research assistant position, you can... I doubt they'll ask you because it's entry level.
Okay.
But when they talk about challenges, mm-hmm. like any challenges you faced, mm-hmm. and how did you overcome them, You can say during my internship in California, I was doing a QA visit at a site for a irritable bowel syndrome study. That's what this is, right?
Alzheimer's.
Oh, this was Alzheimer's?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. See, we're switching them up. Okay, so for Alzheimer's, and I noticed that the screening and enrollment log was missing or not up to date, whatever it was. Because usually they're not missing; they're just not filed.
Inside the actual.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you would talk to the coordinator. Because sometimes if they are maintaining it, they're keeping it like Monica would keep it on her desk, and not in the rec binder because it's just easier to fill out. Because that's something you fill out every visit, every time a patient comes in. So it's like kind of cumbersome to go in the reg binder every time. So they just keep those like on their desk, somewhere where they can just grab it real quick and put it back. So as a CRA, you would ask, do you have it? Are you maintaining it? Let me see it. And usually you take a copy of it for your report as a CRA.
Okay.
Right? As a research assistant at a site, you're probably going to be the one updating it. Yeah.
Okay.
Right? So it's the same thing, but different. They're going to ask you, like, or they probably won't even ask you, but you can tell them based on what job it is that you are interviewing for. You can cater it to what they want to hear.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Then that's good because they always ask those kind of questions like, name a recent challenge that you had to overcome when you were at a site or in your most recent place of work or where you interned because you're going to tell them you interned, right?
Yeah. And it says, and there was an area too where we did there with the monitoring. They made notations of certain deviations. They said minor, and then it was like one, but most of them were like minor deviations. And it was asking, was the principal investigator informed? And then it was saying deviation study conduct and or CRF completion. So I didn't.
Number 9?
Number 9. The case report form.
Was the PI informed of significant deviations in the study conduct and our CRF completion?
So there was notation in the file regarding anything that, any slight deviations from protocol, whatever, but I didn't know where exactly would I confirm whether or not the principal investigator was.
Well, so that's a good question. So for this, so when you're filling out this report, this is a monitoring report. This is for monitors. So it tells you to basically reminds you to inform the PI that deviations did occur if you found any.
Okay. So I would be the one.
Yeah. Now they probably already know.
Yeah. But I'll just reminder.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and maybe like retrain the site if needed.
Okay.
Now, if the PI doesn't realize there was a deviation, because sometimes the sponsor will catch the deviation before you go out, or sometimes the site will recognize they had a deviation and will fill out the forms. There's deviation form. You have to submit it to the IRB and the sponsor. The site does. But if they didn't, and you're catching it as the monitor for the first time, that's what that's for.
Oh, okay. Because it was documented wherever the deviations or whatever.
It was documented, yeah.
Yeah, it was already documented.
In those cases, you would just, when you have your 10, 20 minutes with the PI,
just remind them.
You would just go over it.
Okay.
Yeah. Say, hey, I'm sure you're aware you've had deviations. I see all the documentation's there. Try to not have it occur again. If it becomes a recurring problem, then they do what's called a corrective action plan, corrective and preventative action plan. It's called a CAPA. Did Shanae talk about that?
I believe she did go into detail.
CAPA plan?
I have it in my notes. So yeah, I think she did go over that.
So that, they can ask that as a question too. Yeah. From both companies when you go interview about deviations. When you go interview as an assistant, they're going to ask you, what have you done in your internship that prevents or is proactive against deviations, or when you
occur.
discover one, what do you
Yeah.
do?
Okay.
You know, so
Okay.
you got to answer it that way. And then for the CRA, they're definitely going to ask you that.
Yeah. How would you inform the site in
How would
regards?
you inform, or what steps do you take to maybe prevent deviations from occurring?
Okay.
Like, proactively, do you tell the site, like if you know visit 3 is a tricky visit, and a lot of sites are having similar issues there, then your site, before their visit 3, you could call to remind or email them. Better to email, that way you document it.
Yeah.
That, hey, watch out for this. Watch out for this trap here, because a lot of the sites are making mistakes here. Like, those are good interview answers.
Okay.
Deviations are so yeah. When a deviation occurs, what does the site do? What is the site supposed to do?
When the deviations do occur,
Yeah.
well, you do need to, most definitely document them.
Yeah.
And then once you do document any deviations that occur, then making sure you're following the protocol, what it states that you need to do, or the SOPs, what it states you need to do when it does occur, and then determine whether or not it's a major one that needs to maybe go higher level. Would you look at it?
They're all major.
Well, PI, no matter what.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're all major. The question becomes, does it affect patient safety?
Okay.
And if so, then you need to inform the IRB as well.
Okay.
But if it doesn't, then
also,
it's just sponsored.
And the PI.
Yeah, of course. But so a deviation goes against the protocol, and technically, that means that's in some cases it means the subject's ineligible to continue. So you need what's called a waiver request. But in all the cases, there's a protocol deviation form. Sometimes it's a paper like this. Other times it's done through the EDC, where the site has to fill out that deviation form and send it to the sponsor, and maybe the IRB. The IRBs will have their own forms sometimes.
So will they make a decision whether or not they wanted to proceed with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's when the medical monitor would get involved if it's like a patient safety issue. Like, let's say the deviation was an inclusion-exclusion criteria that they overlooked, and the patient is now randomized, although they were not actually qualified, right? But the site didn't know, and so they've already done a few visits, and now you're discovering it as the monitor. What do you do? Because technically each visit that they've had is a deviation, and it's one deviation for the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So can that patient continue in the study or not?
I would think that they wouldn't be able to, would they, until you correct the initial inclusion-exclusion.
Yeah, but you can correct it. Let's say it was, let's say the exclusion was a BMI of 35 or under, and the patient had a BMI of 36.
So
you can't correct that. Or CONMEDs, right? Like, let's say an exclusion is you can't take certain blood pressure medications, but they are, and the site just overlooked it. Because with these IE criteria, there's like sometimes 30 of them, right? And if you don't have the PI oversight, it's up to a coordinator to make sure that every single one of those IE criteria is met. And if they're busy and doing a bunch of things, or they're just not experienced, it's very easy. And now if you're the CRA, and if you're a good CRA, you're going to catch it. If you're a bad CRA or lazy, you're not going to catch it either. And then guess what's going to happen? That patient will finish. And then he should have never finished. Yeah. And then let's say the sponsor audits.
That's going to be horrible.
They're going to say, wait a minute, how did this guy get in?
Included into the study.
And look, the monitor never told them anything about it. And who is this monitor? And then they're going to look at all the sites you've monitored and go audit them and audit you. And no, it's not good.
Yeah.
So you got to pay attention, because you're the last line as a CRA, you're the last line of defense before the FDA. Really, like if the site's not catching their own mistakes, which Sometimes they don't. It's up to you. And if you don't do it, I mean, there's no one else that's coming to the site. It's just you, unless the sponsor audits.
So no matter how small, because I've been told I can be a little OCD, so no
That's
matter.
a good trait.
So even bringing the little small things, the details
Yeah.
to their attention,
It's a good trait to have.
You would rather have them know and have it documented that
Yes.
they've been informed than
Yes.
to not mention it at all.
And even when you're not sure,
Mm-hmm.
you should email your lead or the medical monitor or whatever the monitoring plan calls for.
Mm-hmm.
Like, follow that chain of command.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're not sure,
Yeah.
like, you better be safe than sorry, because if you just, like, overlook it, and you're going to overlook things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible, but you don't want to overlook major things like deviations, especially. It doesn't get any bigger than inclusion-exclusion criteria that's not met. Like, I mean, that patient will finish if the FDA sees that patient's data is not good, right? They can't use it. The sponsor just spent all that money reviewing data they can't even use. And who knows what other subjects you monitored. It happens so much. That's why they're moving towards these algorithms to do it, like EDC, and when they start doing eSource, the algorithms are going to be able to look at these things quicker and better than humans, right? But we're a ways away from that, and CRAs are going to be focused more on like proactive, like how to prevent things from happening, rather than trying to clean up stuff. Because right now that's what CRAs are doing, is just cleaning up mistakes, or like trying to properly, I guess, write reports and document issues. But once you have machines doing that, which we're close, not that close. Close is like 10 years away. Then the CRAs are doing just like proactive stuff. But right now, like that's, this job that you're going to get as a CRA, hopefully you get both and then you can choose which one you want.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
Wow, that's crazy. We have a lot of students in Atlanta that are having a hard time even getting interviews.
Really? Yeah. I mean,
you were in this last class in
I was in
March?
Yeah, the one that just finished.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
We've had some students like from last year's classes that are still having issues getting interviews.
I guess I've just been blessed in that area because I've really been digging.
Maybe they like the project manager stuff.
Yeah, because I was working in that insurance field.
Because that translates well to this.
Yeah, because you seriously have to manage multiple tasks, major tasks, and you deal with catastrophes and things like that.
Yeah, you're used to documenting. They're either interested in like science or like transferable skills, like a science background. Like nurses get CRA jobs right away.
Yeah.
Like if you're an RN and you're entry level, like no experience, like every single RN that took our academy got hired quickly. Like all of them.
Yeah, I noticed that.
That translates fast.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to educate them on what the medications are, how they contraindicate. That's another thing is like the investigational product. Some of the IE criteria is to prevent contraindication of the med with excluded meds. And if you're a CRA that doesn't really understand medicine, you may overlook that because you've got to have that medicine book with you. It's
I
have. What is it called? That.
Because Shanae told us to get a few.
Yeah.
I have two that she
What is it
told
called?
us
Do you remember?
I can't remember like the top
It's a little
of my head.
handbook, right?
Yeah, but it's like a thesaurus for medicine. It gives you the proper scientific and
I used to have one of those.
Name for it. It's really good.
When I was coordinating, I don't coordinate anymore. I should get back into it here and there with Monica, just to stay relevant. But it was like a book like this, a little thicker, just for psychiatry, because those were the psychiatry trials I was doing back then. Okay. So yeah, like you would have to go through one of those things. Yeah. And who's gonna do that like all the time? Yeah. When you have like this many books to review at the site.
Yeah.
Like, are you really going to go through every medication for every site? You're not, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're a nurse, you probably already have a general understanding of which meds are contraindicated, right? So that's why they want nurses.
I think that, because a few of the books that I've read, a lot of nurses recommended when they were in school and things like that. And so that's why I decided to read up on some of those too.
That's good. I'm glad you got the interviews coming up. So just keep in mind who you're interviewing with and then what they want, because the sites want different things than that.
Yeah, depending on the role. So I kind of figure with the assistant role that I want me to be more on top of making sure to prevent issues and
what they want that, but what they really want is someone to be a coordinator later.
Yeah.
And so if you're already halfway
like.
there,
that's
what it
good. Sounds like. Because it said advancement immediately and then taking over even regional, it was mentioned.
Too. I didn't read the job description. I just assumed that's the case.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to, like, even in a small clinic like this, it's great. I can hire an assistant. I mean, that's, I can hire. That's not hard, but it's hard to find an assistant that I think can make a good coordinator. Right? So if you can demonstrate that in your interview.
That's what I'm hoping I can study on. And then Sinead gave me a few things too to also read up on and study.
That's good.
And practice.
Are you on Slack with us? With the group?
No, I'm not on that.
I gotta invite you to Slack. You were invited.
Was it?
Yeah, it's a group chat for all the former students and all the current students.
I think Marco Polo.
Oh, okay, yeah, she was using that in March.
Yeah, that's
I don't think she uses that anymore. Does she?
Yeah, she
still uses it.
Yeah, because I was talking to her a few times on it, and she responds back to
on Marco Polo.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she used it with the last.
She told me to get on it, and I did like 1 or 2 videos, but I stopped using it.
Yeah, so she.
But we use Slack too.
Okay.
You can chat with everyone.
Okay, I'm not on that one. But
I'm on there.
Okay.
So that's how I differentiate like a student or a former student from just people watching on YouTube.
Oh.
Because I can get back to them later.
Yeah.
But the students, I need to get back to right away. So if I get a Slack notification, I know it's a student.
I'll add that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you just text me, I won't know. Like, I'll just assume it's from YouTube and I'll wait until I'm done. But in Slack, I'll do it right away.
Okay. Yeah. That'll work.
Yeah.
I might harass you a time or two.
That's okay. It's actually very quiet on Slack.
Okay.
Considering all the students we have.
Okay.
So I'm on it right. Like, if I get something, I'm on it right away.
I mean, I thought it was a really good program. It helped me to get a real good understanding of everything.
Hopefully.
Better than I thought.
Yeah?
It would, yeah. Because my friend, she was also interested. Both of us come with the project management and the insurance field. And she started it. And I'm not sure who she used, but she said that she hasn't been able to get out there, and she's in Texas. And
she did a different training.
Yeah, she did a different training. Yeah. So this is a little bit different from yours, and I think I told her I like yours is because it provided you like a kind of hands-on feel. You were able to actually work the EDC system, things like that. I said that really helped me kind of get some insight into what would be expected.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about. And then going to the sites. I mean, even if you didn't come here, you would have eventually gone to the clinic in Atlanta. But coming here, you get your hands on all this stuff. Like if you notice, we don't use these monitoring reports in the academy at all.
Yeah, I noticed.
There's not enough time to do that. Like, how would you?
Yeah.
When do you even introduce this thing? Because in order to introduce it, you have to have gone through everything.
Yeah.
And by that time, the class is over.
Yeah.
Like, so when would we even be able to discuss this? Only in the internship.
Yeah, the internship is probably the best way to introduce it, and especially then you can actually look at different.
Because then you know where you're looking at. At least you understand like the sections.
Yeah, and it makes better sense too. I wanted when you have your site interim monitoring visit report and different. So each one you put. Okay.
And there's 5 visits, right? The SSV, the SIV. Those are only 1 each, right? 1 per site.
Yeah.
Then you have all the IMVs, as many as it takes. And then you have the closeout visit, right? And then there's other ones like a pre-audit, which are not that common. You may not even need that. Or actual audit. But usually the CRA is not involved in the actual audit. They're involved in like the pre-audit.
I saw the RMV, so remote monitoring visits are also something that becoming more.
Yes, they are. Where did you see that?
I saw RMV in the Alzheimer's patient file. I saw RMV
really?
In the monitoring. Yeah, I saw RMV.
And that stood for remote monitoring visit?
Well, it was under, because it had SIV and then it had RMV.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, they're trying to implement that already. I'm telling you, by 2028. I think that's, yeah, so RMV is like, it is an IMV, but it's just done remotely.
Instead of coming on to the site. But you can only do so many RMVs, though. You still have to come to initially to the site when you're doing the interim.
In theory, no.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you have all the source scanned and uploaded to Intralinks.
And you're using the EDC and everything.
Yeah. And all the reg binders all scanned.
Okay.
And I mean, it's really just the IP, right? The investigational product.
Yeah.
That you would have to go count the pills or look at the vials.
To check. Okay. So you can.
But no one's doing that yet.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Nobody.
But initially, that's what they're attempting to try.
That's what they are doing, trying to do. And wait till they use eSource when you're writing on like a iPhone. Right? That's the source. It's timestamped. It's dated. And it's instantly sent to the cloud. So you don't even need to upload anything. It's just done automatically.
It's immediately updated to the file.
And then when the machines get good at reading that and comparing it to what's in the EDC.
So it's tracking and dating it and time and everything.
And the algorithms can look instead of a person.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, the coordinator, I think, is safer. I think that's harder to replace because you're dealing with patients.
Yeah.
Scheduling, things that don't repeat. I mean, they repeat, but they're not repetitive, like data verification and data review.
Okay. And it seems more it's kind of like a mediator, too, because you're dealing with the CRAs and then you're dealing with the PIs and then the CROs.
But we're a long way away from CRAs being replaced, if ever.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but the job will be different.
Yeah,
and the pay will be less, I think.
Yeah,
I think.
It looks like they're changing some of it, because
they get paid a lot now, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. It's a very detailed job, though. It has a lot of responsibility, too.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because if you're dealing with, like I said, the sites, they're busy, they're inexperienced, or they are experienced, they're busy, or they're both, whatever. If they are not noticing their own mistakes, then there's only one person left to notice it. Unless the mistake's in the EDC, and then the EDC auto-queries. And then it alerts the site why, and then they look at their source and they say, oh, we messed up. But if that doesn't happen, then it's up to the CRA.
I believe we will still need CRAs to that extent, though.
Yeah, I think so.
Because, it's a lot of information to
just
maintain.
Not as many, though.
Yeah.
I don't think as many, and I don't think they'll be traveling as much, and I don't think they'll get paid as much.
Yeah.
They get paid a lot.
Yeah.
But you good for like 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
You can milk it.
For as long as I can.
Yeah.
I will attempt to.
I'm milking it. I'm a CRA on a project right now.
Yeah. So, that's what I intend to do. So.
It's good. But the coordinator, the Emory is good too. So you just interview for both and see what happens. what becomes of that? Yeah. What else?
Question. Okay, now this is were any IND safety updates sent to the site and subsequently reported to the IRB? So I didn't know exactly. It was saying safety aspects. And I didn't see any. It was talking about adverse events, serious adverse events. And I read the IRB. I read the IRB, the information. I looked at the adverse event laws. There weren't any information in that in regards to any serious adverse events. So,
Okay.
so I didn't know what exactly are they really asking me to review with that particular question in regards to anything going to IRB because there weren't any. So obviously, no communication is going to go to them regarding.
If there weren't any, most of the monitoring visits. Well, I shouldn't say most, but it's if you usually ask, have there been any new SAEs since the last visit?
Yeah.
That's what it says here too.
Yeah.
If yes, have reporting procedures been followed? So, what does the site need to do when there's been a SAE? What's the process there?
Well, if there's an SAE, they at least need to alert the IRB, and also, the PI needs to be aware of the.
But how do they alert them? Do they call?
Well, there's I believe there's a documentation format that they use to submit to them to let them know that this particular subject experienced this, and then you have to determine whether or not it was related to the actual product.
Correct. But who determines that?
Whether or not it was related to the product. Well.
Can the coordinator?
Well, the coordinator should be the coordinator wouldn't be the one that would do that. It would be.
Can the CRA do that?
The CRA wouldn't be the one that would be doing that either. So
there's only one person.
It's the PI.
Yep.
Yeah, they're the only ones that would be able to address that.
Because it's an opinion, but it needs to be like a qualified opinion.
Yeah, and they're the only ones normally that they would respect as regards to whether or not it was related to the product that's being taken.
So that first form within 24 hours of the SAE, of the site being aware of the SAE, they have to fill out a SAE report form, the initial report. Okay, that gets sent to the sponsor and the IRB within 24 hours. Okay, once the SAE is resolved, like the patient's out of the hospital or whatever the case may be, they send a follow-up SAE report to the. So now they'll have, and on those reports they'll have the severity of the SAE, a description of what it was, causality, right? And only the PI can put those things down, like the severity, the causality, because the sponsor's then going to look at it. The IRB is going to look at it to see if there's a lot of these same SAEs, they might want to shut the study down. But if the sponsor is going to look at it to see if it's going to make the SUSAR report. You know what SUSAR?
Yeah. I can't remember the acronym. But
I always forget it too. Suspected, unexpected, serious
adverse
reaction. Yep.
Yeah.
So suspected
Unexpected.
and unexpected.
Serious adverse reactions.
So there's some people that would argue unexpected would mean it's not a SAE that the sponsor
was
already aware of from the investigator brochure. Okay, so it's unexpected. So some people would argue that if it's something that's already in the investigator brochure, it shouldn't make a SUSAR report. And some people argue that it should, because it's still suspected related to the drug, right? So it depends on the sponsor in those cases. But what a SUSAR is, do you know what a SUSAR is? Like, what we know what it stands for, but do you know like what?
What is it really for?
Yeah.
I mean, would it be something kind of like kind of like a log that they can go back to in regards to whatever uh, uh, reactions their subjects are having with their product? Is it something like I can't?
So let's say at this site, I'm a patient and I come in, and I told the doctor yesterday I took my meds, the study meds, and I got really dizzy and I fainted, and then they took me to the ER. So that's SAE, right?
Yeah.
And that's the first time the doctor knows about it, so he's gonna fill out the SAE form, send it to sponsor IRB, right? He'll put whether he thinks it's related or not. It could be unsure, yes or no, right? They can put all that. So he might put unsure, and then they'll do the follow up report on me, like because I got out, so they can do initial and a follow up on the same day, right? So now the sponsor looks at that and says, well, the PI put it might be related. We don't see this. We don't see feigning in the investigator brochure, so that's unexpected, right? The PI put maybe, so it's suspected to be maybe caused by the IP, right? So they will most likely put this SAE with the initial and follow-up report on the SUSAR. So now they send the SUSAR to all the sites doing the study. And all the sites doing any study with that drug. So not just this study, but if there's another study with the same drug, it goes to those PIs. So those PIs need to sign and acknowledge that they've read the SUSAR. And the monitor comes in and they have a list of all the SUSARs since the last visit, and they make sure they're all filed in the reg binder. You probably saw them in there, right? So in case another site in Indianapolis has a patient who's experiencing symptoms of dizziness, that doctor can maybe prevent him from fainting or just keep an extra eye on him, right? So that's what it's designed to do.
So kind of like an alert to all the others participating in the same trial, in the same study. Okay, so they can be on the lookout to make sure their subjects don't have the same.
That's right.
Experience.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and now let's say that's me. I'm the patient, and I went to the hospital yesterday, and they released me in 3 hours, right? But let's say I was admitted to the ER, and then they released me. So would I be allowed to continue in the study at that point?
If it was like you said 24 hours?
Yeah, I went in the same day and I got out the same day.
Same day?
Yeah.
Well,
I got out like 3 hours later. Now, the next day I'm at my site for my regular visit.
Okay. Well, I mean, a serious adverse event doesn't exclude you, does it?
Sometimes.
Does it?
So what if I would have went to the hospital for a week and I missed my IP for all those days? Because they're not going to give you a study drug in the hospital.
Okay. So then
you got to look at the protocol.
Okay. Yeah.
The answer is you got to look at the protocol.
To see whether or not they would be excluded.
Yeah, were any deviations triggered by this SAE, like by the hospitalization?
Because that would be considered a deviation.
Yeah.
Because you're not okay.
Or if I'm out of window for my next visit because I'm hospitalized.
Yeah.
Right, and they only give plus or minus 3 or plus or minus 7, and I missed my window. Right, the site can request a waiver, protocol waiver,
due to the incident.
Yeah, and then it's up to the sponsor whether they're going to approve that waiver or just have the site. What do they do what's the procedure if the sponsor says, no, we can't approve this waiver, so just you have to withdraw the patient? What's the procedure for the sites?
If they have to withdraw a patient? Yeah. No, that I'm not.
There's a visit for that one.
Okay.
Remember?
Let's see. If there's a particular, so it's not, is it then or not? Well,
no. It's like a visit, like a screening visit, like a random visit, but it's a separate name for this visit.
I'm not really coming to mind which visit that would be.
It's called early termination.
Oh, okay, early terms.
Yeah.
I was
Basically,
just reading that.
It's either the last visit, like where's that schedule assessment?
The late monitor.
This thing right here.
Oh, okay.
So you see the last visit. Let me see. Okay, you see how the last week. Well, this is technically the last week, but it's just follow up.
Mm-hmm.
This last week, week 12, this is the last visit, and it's also / early term.
Okay.
All right. Basically, do all the safety assessments at that visit. So the patient can either make that visit if they completed the whole study, or if they had to be withdrawn, they'll come in and do that. Now, if they have to be withdrawn and they're just not showing up anymore, that's called lost to follow-up. Okay, and the sites need to make attempts to get the patient to come in for early term visit. Now, how do you know as a CRA if the site made those attempts?
They should have phone calls and letter attempts documented in the file.
There you go.
Yeah.
Certified letter and 3 documented phone calls. Minimum. They can do more, but that's the minimum for GCP. Same thing if a subject, let's say a subject came in, screened, came in for a few visits, and then just fell off the map, like not answering calls, didn't show up for this visit, didn't show up again, not responding. So now, obviously, can't continue, but we need to get him or her in here for the early term visit. We at least need to get the drug back. So you also do the same thing there, right? Certified mail, phone call, documented. Let's say you get the subject on the phone, and they're like, yeah, I just don't want to come back in anymore. You would tell them as a site, okay, well, at least send us back the IP. Or at least come in and drop off the IP. We don't need to do the visit. But it would be nice if you would do it. You get compensated for another visit. Right? So this is could be an interview question for your research assistant. Because you'll be interacting with the patients.
Yeah, that makes sense too. When you're not able to reach someone, then what would be the next step that we would use?
And those guys probably have their own SOPs for how to follow up with lost to follow-ups. Right? And there's another thing sites should do. So let's say the patient had to withdraw because their ECG results were clinically significant, and the PI thinks it's related to the IP, so they want to stop it and just withdraw the patient. Okay? Now, let's say that PI is not that patient's doctor.
So
what do you do?
So the PI isn't the doctor in order to address removing them from the program?
No, yeah, the PI is that doctor. Like, he sees the ECG, and he says, I think it could be due to the drug. It's not worth jeopardizing this person's health for a study. So we're going to take you off the study, Chiquita. It's not good for you.
So it's not the actual medical doctor that does the examination and checks them to confirm whether or not the drug is the...
It's up to the PI.
Okay.
That's even if that's not his patients, while they're in the study, that's his patient.
His decision. Okay.
Now, what is the proper procedure for the site notifying the patient's real doctor, or should they at all?
Inform the patient's doctor in regards to the study. Now, you would think that they would contact them in regards to the patient.
You would think.
Yeah.
A place like Emory will.
Yeah.
They have their own SOPs.
Yeah.
But not just you don't assume as a CRA that that's
that's their
getting done.
responsibility. Oh, okay.
So
would we send So would we send notification to that individual's doctor?
yeah. So
To
what
let
I
them.
would do, and every site has its own SOPs for this, but you at least give the patient a copy of their result. Like in this case, it was ECG. So you just give them a copy of the ECG report. Maybe the doctor, like a copy of the progress note. Maybe not, just ECG. And you tell the patient, take this to your doctor. Right? That's like at the minimum what should be done. But some sites have SOPs like we have to send a certified letter to the patient's doctor. Now you don't have to include study specifics. It's just this patient was in a study. We withdrew him because of this.
Serious. Okay.
Yeah, please begin regular treatment with him again.
Or if they were receiving prior treatment, reinitiate the other treatment.
Yeah.
That they were stopped. Okay.
Re-explore like what treatments you think would be appropriate. But we can't give information on the study itself. Like they can't even, unless it's a drug that's already out there, they can't mention
anything
what the drug is.
Okay.
So that's now sometimes the doctors will, like if they get on the phone with each other, which is rare, the PI will tell the treating physician, hey, we're working on this experimental treatment. It's in this class of drugs, similar to this. Technically, I don't think that's allowed, but it's done a lot.
I know with Emory, I know they have physicians that recommend their patients for some studies of that.
So if they're sub-Is, they're privileged to receiving info about the study because they're part of the CDA. But if they're outside of the group, they're not privileged to that information. Now, that doesn't mean they don't get it sometimes. But they're not, as far as I'm concerned, I'm no attorney, but they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
But the important thing is, as a CRA or as a coordinator, is that you're at least giving the patient a copy of their results, maybe with a letter, and maybe you just call the doctor and leave a message with their receptionist. Like, if this person was in a study, he's not in it anymore, we're giving him a copy of his ECG, and he'll be calling you for scheduling an appointment. So that's, they might ask you, even if they don't ask you that, you can bring that up.
That makes sense, though. And being the coordinator, assistant, more than likely you'll have to deal with that.
Especially at a place like Emory.
Yeah. Okay. That would be something I have to. I have, when we're talking about investigational products, and usually it'll have a section where it goes into detail with
IP.
Yeah,
you can do that tomorrow with Monica.
Okay.
You basically, like, if it's a pill, if it's a blister pack or a bottle with pills, it's not elegant, but the CRA just counts the pills. And then you look at each visit has its own blister pack or pill bottle. So, and then the subject's supposed to return the unused pills. So you can calculate their compliance percentage. Because some studies have a protocol requirement of maintaining compliance throughout the study. And the site is supposed to check on compliance at every visit. Now, sometimes it has to be 100% compliant, plus or minus 5%, plus or minus 10%, 15%. I've seen as high as 20%, plus or minus. So you can be over compliant or under compliant. But as long as you're in that range that the protocol allows, you're okay. But if you get outside of that range, even by one pill, it's technically a deviation, right? So then the site is supposed to do what?
Follow your protocol in regards to any deviations.
Yeah. So let's say you're the patient here, right? And you come in and you return 7 pills, and I, as a coordinator, know that you should have returned only 4 to be 100% compliant. You returned 7. So let's say you're under compliant by 30%. And my protocol says you need to maintain a plus or minus 20% compliance. So me as the coordinator, I need to tell you that technically you can't be in the study anymore. I've got to now call the medical monitor and see if I can request a waiver to let you continue. Now, for those kind of things, usually the medical monitor will approve it, but they will want the site to re-educate the patient on compliance and why it's important. I'll say, hey, Chiquita, you're not on any meds right now except this study, and if you're not compliant, there's a chance that you can develop symptoms of your disease or whatever it is you're there for, right? And if you're not taking it, like, you may get AE, you may get side effects. So you got to make sure that you take it. Right? Sometimes patients will say that they lost the pills, right? You're supposed to re-educate them there as well, because you can't calculate compliance if they didn't bring anything back. So you got to take their word for it. But if they keep doing that, then you know something's wrong. Either they're not capable of following study, which usually is IE criteria. They have to be mentally capable to follow through with the study. Or they're doing something else, like selling it, or like in the case of opioids, yeah, that's very serious. Like, we've had an opioid study, and every pill, like every single pill, needs to be accounted for. And it's not just the FDA and the sponsor you got to worry about with those studies, it's the DEA. Like, they'll come in with guns and handcuffs. Yeah. If they see that the site is, and they don't care about research or not, they just care that these controlled substances are not being accounted for. I've seen it, not at my sites, but I've seen DEA going into doctors' offices. Nothing to do with the research, but just going in with guns. You've seen that too?
I saw.
You see? So for those kind of studies, like, that's IP compliance is extremely important. You can't just accept that the patient says he lost it.
Yeah, I was reading the one yesterday, and there was a patient that, maybe like 1 week, and then 2 weeks later they lose and then maybe 2 weeks later, or the 4th week they forgot it, or did, and then they would bring it back the next visit. So how do you, and when I was reading it, it didn't seem as if they went over like any compliance detail with that patient then.
Yesterday at the clinic?
Yeah, it was, I think it was the male, it was a male patient, and...
Did Chris go over that with you? Or?
Well, I'm trying to think. We didn't go into detail with that, but that's one question that I had wrote down that I wanted to ask about. What do you do in those situations? Because they did eventually, they finished the study or whatever, but what do you do? They did return the previous one, blister back or what.
They're just not returning it when they should be.
Yeah, they're not returning it when they should.
You just document, as a site, you should document every time patient was re-educated on the importance of. When I used to coordinate, I would just literally write the same thing every time about this. Just have a sentence in your progress note. Patient, even if they were 100% compliant, patient was reminded about the importance of compliance with studied drug. At this visit, they returned their blister, or at this visit they didn't, but they said that they
will return it the following
blah blah
visit,
blah,
and which is how it was documented.
Yeah.
But
one patient told me it fell behind the fridge and he didn't want to get it.
Yeah.
And I told them, well, you better bring it next time.
Yeah,
You better
have
get
to,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll
I mean,
tell you all kinds of things, but you need to document, and then you need to make sure that you follow up with it for the next time.
yeah.
And as long as the coordinator is documenting, the CRA, I mean, there's nothing the CRA can do. It's being documented.
Yeah.
You can't go to the patient's house and
Yeah,
get it
you
yourself.
and that's the thing. So as long as you see that they whatever deviations or whatever issue that may arise, which is you dealing with humans, obviously there's gonna be something that comes up. So I mean, I'm pretty sure the FDA doesn't expect you to be 100% perfect.
No.
But at least document. Everything. And if you're showing that you're maintaining it that way, then that should be just as acceptable as well.
Yeah, documentation, unless it's required by the protocol, like compliance, and then you have like 3 visits in a row where you can't verify the compliance other than the patient telling you that they took it appropriately, which you would document as well. But it's good practice to attempt to get those. And it's usually just an extra effort for the site to talk to the patient about it. And sometimes the patients don't think it's important. I mean, we've had some patients throw theirs away, and we have to re-educate them that you can't do this. It's not like your regular meds. We need them back.
We have to keep record of everything.
Yeah, and then some of them feel bad. They say, "Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry." And then you document what they said and what you said. You can't just leave it blank and then leave it up for the FDA to guess what happened. You got to document everything. As a research assistant or as a CRA, you got to make sure the site is documenting. And if they're not, it's an action item. CRA discovered that there was no documentation regarding IP that was not returned. CRA encouraged. Oh, and that's how you write the reports, by the way. You don't put I did. You put CRA did. Yeah. Okay. CRA listed this as action item for site to have resolved prior to next monitoring visit, either with a note to file or something to document what's going on.
And then the follow-up letter is like a reminder.
Follow-up letter, yeah. So these reports, the site will never see. That's only the sponsor will see it. But before the sponsor sees it, your lead CRA will have to approve it. So sometimes they'll give you revisions, or they'll have comments, like they'll ask for clarification, like, "Hey Chiquita, I noticed you wrote this down. I don't think that's a deviation because this I've removed it. Unless you disagree with me, we're gonna keep it like that." Happened to me the other day with my own monitoring report for my contract series gig I have, and I put something down as a deviation when it wasn't. And so she just said, "No, this is not a deviation. This is why. I've removed it. Unless you think it is, then we need to talk about why." And then I said, "No, it's not. I made a mistake." And then then she sends the finalized version. I sign it, and then the sponsor gets it. So the sponsor doesn't see all the rough drafts. They just see the final version. And then the final version you'll use to generate a follow-up letter to the site. But they won't see the report. They'll just see the action items.
Okay. All right. So this is just for our record.
That's for you. Yep. To cover your own and to show the sponsor and to allow the sponsor to have oversight over the study.
And this is just a way to make sure when you go to the sites, kind of, keeping a check on everything that you need to look through.
And keeping track of what you did the last time, what action items are ongoing. Because let's say you discover 12 action items at this visit that needs to be completed before your next visit. Well, your next visit may be 6 weeks away, 8 weeks away. How are you going to remember all those things, right? You won't. So unless you can have your report as a reference. And then the first thing I do is when I get to a site, I look at the previous action items and I see if they've been completed or not before I even start anything else. for that visit. I see which ones are still open. And hopefully they've all been resolved, but it rarely happens that way. And then you talk to the coordinator, hey, why hasn't this been resolved?
So with EDC, that's where you do the queries, or
yeah, the EDC, you can issue a query in the EDC. Yeah, I'll have Monica show you that. Sites can't issue queries, but they can respond to queries.
Okay.
CRAs issue queries.
Okay.
Sites don't issue queries.
So when you're actually if I'm gonna be the coordinator, the assistant, and then I see things that need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They have their own way of tracking, just the same, stay in line with the SOPs and things.
Yes, like that. They probably have. Most sites don't use like a CTMS, but a big place like that might. Well, they'll track like ongoing action items, but even if not, you can just look at the follow-up letters and look at the EDC and see if there's any open queries.
So there were some systems I think they listed that they use. Their electronic systems, I believe that they use. So I could check that myself and see and kind of familiarize myself with those systems.
And tell them you've used Intralinks already, and you've used BioClinica, and whichever one Monica shows you tomorrow. Okay. You have experience with those. Okay. We don't have a CTMS here, but if you really want to impress them, the assistant at the interview, if they ever ask you, which they always do, name or explain or describe a recent example of you going above and beyond. I don't know. I haven't interviewed in a long time, but you know how they ask you those things. Yeah. Go above and beyond to improve efficiency at your place of employment, right? They always ask you something like that. Probably better worded than that, but they'll ask you something similar. You can say for a coordinator or for a research assistant, what I do is, and I learned this from a site that I monitor actually, when the monitors come in for their visits, I go through, the day before they come in, I go through all the action items from their follow-up letter, and I make sure they're all completed, and if they're not, I'll write down why on a little notepad. And as soon as the monitor comes in the next day for their visit, I will sit down with them and explain which action items have been closed and which ones are still ongoing and why. That way they don't have to do that. You're saving them time. Yeah. You're saving them 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, that is helpful.
They would love, if you said that, they would love you. You get the job based off of that alone.
That would be perfect. Yeah.
So use that when the opportunity comes. It should come.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that would be one. That would be, I could see that being a very high score.
Yeah. I learned that from a site I monitor, and now we have Monica. And I told Monica about that, and she said she's already been doing that.
That's good.
But my other site, I told them, they were like, "Oh, Krista, that's a great idea. We should do that."
That is a good idea.
And they teach that at the ACRP. Because I asked that coordinator, who taught you this? And she said, well, our site director taught us all this, but they learned it from the ACRP.
That's even better.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a very good interview statement, example, whatever you call it.
Yeah, to use.
Answer. And it's related to action items.